video, I'm going to talk about the differences between a due date and plan dates inside of Morgen. The due date being the deadline of a task, plan dates being the time you plan to do the task before the deadline, the due date. When we're looking at Morgen, you can see I've got events on my calendar. I have a personal event here on my orange calendar, and then I have events in my work and personal calendar, which is why it's purple and orange, and then I have a bank holiday on Monday. But then I have tasks in the left task sidebar. At the moment, this task doesn't have a due date or a plan date because I can't see anything on the task. However, Mum's birthday card has one plan date, you can see by the calendar, that was actually in the past, and then the trampoline task has a due date for the 23rd of May. If I schedule this task on the calendar and I double click to show the task edit window, I have a planned start date and a planned start time, a planned end date and a planned end time, and then I have no due date information. If I now look at the task in the sidebar, you can see it's been scheduled for tomorrow. But I could also schedule this again, let's say on Tuesday, the next day, at the same time. But now the icon has changed because I've got multiple sessions. See our video linked at the top about multiple sessions. But when I double click on this task, I have a planned start and planned end date and time, which are different to the previous session, which here is the 26th. Not the 27th, but there is still no due date. If I was to click here and add a due date for, let's say, the 28th, I now have a due date on the task for the 28th, and you'll notice inside the task sidebar, it's now showing the due date Wednesday 28th as the due date for the main task, and when we look at the other session, the due date is also being shown. So the 28th is now the due date. If I come up to the view inside of the task sidebar and then manage due date on the calendar, I can now see the due date on the calendar separate from the scheduled task times. So we have two planned start and end sessions and then a due date visualization, which if we click block on the calendar creates another session, double click, with different planned start date and time, planned end date and time, but the due date is still the same. If I was to move the due date to Thursday, the due date has been updated in all of these tasks, and you can see the due date's been changed in the task sidebar. When using any external task integration, you can see when I click, the due date is brought in from the task tool. So the due date is synced to Notion, and I can edit it today, tomorrow, after tomorrow. If I click on view and then manage the due dates on the calendar, and then we go backwards to the 23rd, you can see the Notion Morgen integration. There is the due date. I can move the due date and that will update in Notion, and you'll see a pop-up, the due date has been updated in Notion. But if I left click and drag this task onto the calendar and double click, you can see we've got a planned start date and time, planned end date and time, but this is Morgen specific information that's not synced back to Notion. And I can schedule multiple sessions of this Notion task inside of Morgen, giving it multiple planned start and end times, but the due date is still synced back to Notion and is the same. So again, if I move it over to Friday, the due date will be synced to Notion and that will be changed on all of these task slots.